Thank you, Joe. We'll go straight to the election campaign. We're joined in the studio by the Treasurer, Josh Frydenberg. Treasurer, good morning to you. But we have to start by asking you about the event that really is shocking everybody here in Australia, right around the world, the Notre Dame Inferno.
Well, the Notre Dame is a world icon, and this is a national tragedy. It's such an important link with our religious and cultural past. I think we all stand with Parisians and French people today in just shaking our heads in dismay. I saw one of the global newspaper headlines, an unholy inferno, and exactly that is what it is. I just hope it can be rebuilt so that future generations can enjoy what our generation and generations before us have seen.
The former Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull has tweeted this morning his shock at what's happened. He's also calling on both Scott Morrison and Bill Shorten to support an Australian fund to be set up to help the restoration of Notre Dame. As Treasurer, is that something you'd support?
Absolutely. I mean, if money is going towards the restoration and Australians who want to contribute can, then that's to be supported. No doubt many will off their own volition, Michael, and no doubt every Parisian will dig deep as well. So I don't think there'll ever be a shortage of funds for this to happen. But what I do think is that we all shake our heads and just in disbelief as to what has happened.
OK, let's leave Notre Dame and go to the election campaign. What action is the Liberal Party going to take against Gladys Liu, your candidate for the Melbourne seat of Chisholm, for describing as rubbish LGBTI issues?
Well, as you know, it was our party, our government, the coalition, that has seen same-sex marriage become law, and we're very proud of that fact. And there's so many champions on our side, not least, you know, Warren Entsch and Tim Wilson and Trevor Evans and Trent Zimmerman and many, many others. So we care deeply about these issues. Certainly I, like many of my colleagues, have spoken about this. Those comments obviously were a few years ago, but I thought you were going to ask me questions about Melissa Park resigning in Western Australia, or Michael Daly's comments. I mean, I'm focused on the future.
And we're asking about the Labor Party. Those comments made in 2016. Chinese people come to Australia, this is Gladys Liu, quoting directly, because they want good things for the next generation, not to be destroyed. They use the word destroyed by same-sex, transgender, intergender, all this rubbish to them. They are just ridiculous rubbish.
Well, we strongly support equality, and that's why we, were able to preside over the same-sex marriage
Or do you
debate.
strongly condemn these comments then, based on that?
Well, those comments don't reflect my views, don't reflect Scott Morrison's views, don't reflect the party's views.
They reflect the view of a Liberal candidate in a closely watched seat. Again, what action is the party going to take? Melissa Park was disendorsed by the Labor Party.
Well, I think the key point here is, as a party, we presided over the same-sex marriage debate when it became law. That's something we're very proud of, and no one can ever take it away.
Will you disendorse Gladys Liu?
I'm not going to disendorse Gladys Liu.
Why not?
Because I actually think she's a strong local candidate. But the point is, we as a party stand for tolerance. We as a party and as a government have presided over the same-sex marriage debate, which ended successfully.
OK, and how do you think LGBTI voters in Chisholm will think about those remarks?
Well, you direct your questions towards them.
OK. The Grattan Institute today has put out a report where it's crunched the numbers, lots of crunching of numbers going on, and they've come up with the view that your Stage 2 and Stage 3 tax cuts to fund them will cost, by 2029, $40 billion a year. Well, are they on the money?
No. And very clearly, what has led to our strong budget position, a surplus, the first in more than a decade, which is really important, because if your listeners and viewers knew that we were spending $18 billion a year on our interest bill on our debt, that could build 500 schools a year, one teaching hospital in every state and territory, so we've got to reduce debt. But the reason why we've got a strong budget position and we've been able to provide tax relief is because we've got a record number of Australians in work. And the proportion of working age Australians who are on welfare is the lowest in 30 years. Our spending as a proportion of the overall economy to GDP is 24.6% in 2019-20. It comes down by the end of the decade, Michael, to 23.6%. That is still half a percentage point higher than at the last year of the Howard government.
Right.
So these are not unrealistic.
Says, and using its word, it describes that as heroic. It believes that sort of spending cut magnitude can't be achieved in that amount of time without serious cuts.
Well, we have shown that we can bring the rate of spending growth down to the lowest of any government in 50 years and at the same time spend record amounts on hospitals, schools and roads, grow the economy so that we're growing faster than any G7 country except the United States, create more than 1.2 million new jobs, legislate tax cuts for more than 10 million Australians, and provide a pathway forward for long-term structural reform, a pathway that is rejected by Bill Shorten, who has $387 billion of higher taxes to impose on the Australian people.
The Parliamentary Budget Office has tallied up your tax cuts as being worth $50 billion by 2029 in savings measures. Are they right or are they wrong?
Well, that's actually not right as well. What our tax cuts do is put more money in the hands of Australian workers.
Yeah, that's the case, but we're talking about the cost here. What is the right figure of $50 billion by the Parliamentary Budget Office?
Well, I can tell you what it is, and we announced it on budget night, is $158 billion of tax relief with a focus on low and middle income earners. You see, if you're a teacher or a tradie earning $60,000 a year, you'll get $1,080 in your pocket in just 11 weeks' time as a result of what this government has done. That's money that will go to your quarterly energy bill, your monthly mortgage or your yearly car insurance premium. We've also laid out a strong economic plan with $100 billion on infrastructure, 80,000 new apprentices, as all of this without increasing taxes.
A couple of quick issues before we go. If the government is re-elected, are further company tax cuts firmly off the table?
Well, our focus has been on small and medium-sized businesses.
Okay, but I'll ask the question again.
We've got no plans for tax cuts other than what for small business and medium-sized business that we've already announced. We're bringing it down to 25%. We've fast-tracked that. We've got the instant asset write-off, which is extended to $30,000. And, of course, we've created a $2 billion securitisation fund to increase access to small business for finance.
Former Victorian Supreme Court Judge Stephen Charles, who was instrumental in setting up the Victorian anti-corruption watchdog, is strongly critical in the Nine newspapers this morning of the lack of transparency in federal politics. He is calling for, amongst other things, real-time political donations. We won't know until February next year who has donated to the Coalition, who's donated to the Labor Party. Surely we can do better than that. Why can't we have real-time donations?
Well, I can tell you who's donating to the Labor Party, and that's the unions in record amounts.
Okay.
And they're going to be wagging
donations,
and they're going to be wagging the tail.
Yep.
Wagging Bill Shorten's tail.
Yeah, and okay, so tell us if that's, you can tell us who's donating to you in real time.
Well,
why wouldn't voters want to hear that?
Well, with all political donations, they go through the party system. They're released and they're transparent, and I think that's an important part of our system.
Not until February next year.
Well,
which is
as you know,
way too late.
They're done every year. But what we are going to be doing is obviously communicating our message. But the Labor Party will outspend us probably 3 to 1, and that's because big unions are backing big Labor, and unfortunately, that's going to hurt the Australian economy.
Finally, former Prime Minister Tony Abbott says that he'd be willing to be drafted back into the Liberal Party leadership if the Coalition loses. Do you ever see any circumstance where Tony Abbott will lead your party again?
Well, I know Tony Abbott's got his hands full in his own seat, and that's where his focus is, and that's where it should be. Where we are focused, Scott Morrison and myself, Michael McCormack and the whole Coalition team, is on delivering more jobs, lower taxes, record funding on hospitals and schools and roads. That's a record that we're proud of. That's the record that we will continue.
Do you see any circumstances in which Tony Abbott will lead your party again?
Well, I see Scott Morrison as the leader of our party today,
it's
tomorrow.
It's a simple question, Josh Frydenberg. Yes or no will suffice.
Well, as I said, you're asking me about Tony Abbott, and I'm saying his focus is on his seat.
Oh, he's looking at the leadership as well. If he wins his seat, and B, if you're in opposition, do you see any circumstance in which Tony Abbott will lead your party again?
What I say is Scott Morrison is providing strong leadership. Bill Shorten's been the opposition leader for 6 years. It doesn't matter who he's up against. He's not the preferred Prime Minister, and the reason is people can see through his lies, they can see through his bad policies, and ultimately it's the Coalition that will deliver a stronger economy, lower taxes and more jobs. OK, we'll have to leave it there. Treasurer, thank you so much for joining us on News Breakfast this morning. Great to be with you. OK, let's go back to Paris and that devastating fire at the Notre Dame Cathedral. The fire has been burning now for more than 5 hours. A few hours ago, these pictures of people near the Notre Dame Cathedral singing came out to us on social media. Beautiful stuff. Let's have a look.